All right, yo, we back with another video. So today we're actually going to be going over if you should summon for the newest character, which is keep hammering at them, Nobara Kugisaki, right? So of course we're going to be talking about her kit, what she kind of does, where she sits in the current meta, if she's worth pulling for, and so forth, right? So let's kind of go over her kit, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how I feel of the character. And then you could kind of just understand if you need to actually pull for this character or not, right? So let's get right into it. I'll just kind of go through every skill, and then I'll actually talk about what is the most like strong part about her entire kit. Okay, so of course she can Black Flash, right? And she grants increased Jujutsu damage special to self and could recover cursed energy by 15. So not bad. This is when she does Black Flash, of course. So let's talk about the first skill. So you have the first skill, and it deals melee combined damage equal to 49% taijutsu and 150% jujutsu damage, right? To the selected enemy, and then increases the selected enemy's taijutsu damage received by 5% for 5 turns. You might be wondering, why is this so low? There's a reason for why it's low, and we'll kind of talk about that later as I go to the passive, right? Because the passive is going to be, it's going to tie in with the passive, and I don't kind of want to talk about it just yet. I kind of just want to go in order and then talk about what the order of skill level priority I think is the best and most suitable for this character. Let's go into skill 2, which is going to be the ones that do cost cursed energy. So it costs 15 cursed energy, and it deals range combined damage equal to 90% taijutsu and 148% jujutsu damage to selected enemy, and then it increases the selected enemy's jujutsu damage by 16.5% for 2 turns. So again, it's not really a big modifier or a debuff to the enemy, but I mean, it's still a debuff, and again, like I said, it's going to actually tie into what she does with her passive. So overall, it's pretty decent amount of damage for both. Nothing too crazy, very standard of a DPS character. Next up, we're going to be talking about skill 3, which is consecutive strikes. Deals range combined damage equal to 115% taijutsu and 197% jujutsu damage to the selected enemy 2 hits, and then increases own damage by 20% for 2 turns. Overall, that's pretty good. Considering the only thing that it does is increase its damage. When I do talk about the skill level priorities, I think this is relatively going to be last, just because I mean the increase in own damage is always going to be the same between level 1 and level 10, so I don't feel like it doesn't have a high priority compared to the other skills. Now we have the ultimate, which is going to be Straw Doll Technique Resonance. So I mean, it's a pretty standard damage modifier. It has 800% at level 1, and then at level 10 it has 1318% jujutsu damage to the selected enemy. So considering she is a jujutsu damage and taijutsu damage dealer combined for like the rest of her kit, obviously her main damage dealer is going to be her ult naturally, which means we are going to be mainly focusing on jujutsu damage. So the memories we're going to be using for her is also going to be Jujutsu memories, which is good because a lot of the good memories are Jujutsu based. Next up, let's talk about the passive, and this is where we actually start tying into the character and how she plays, and then of course this will kind of be how we decide if the character is good to pull for or not. And that is weakening Jujutsu attack, which at the start of battle increases own Jujutsu damage by 20%. So this is just at base, right? And the more debuffs and other statuses the enemy has, the higher the Jujutsu damage increase, up to 260%. So you already start off with 20%, right, out of the 260. To get all the way up to 260%, every debuff is going to give you a 12% damage increase, like Jujutsu damage increase, which means you need a total of 20 debuffs in on top of the enemy for you to get the total modifier, which it's possible to do, but very difficult if you do not have the right selected units like SSR Yaga. And then of course they have to be debuffs and statuses that do have a timer, right? You can't have anything that is always permanently propped on the enemy. With that being said, the thing that creates her whole entire kit is just trying to get as much debuffs as possible to get as much damage. So overall, when you kind of like look at the skills, her skills don't really do anything too crazy, so they just do basic standard damage, and then the debuffs aren't even that, like the debuff modifiers aren't even that tremendous or that big. You're not really using it for that what it does, but just for the fact that you'll have an extra debuff on the enemy, which means you can, you know, do more damage with your weakening Jujutsu attack. So her kit is very basic, very standard, nothing crazy. You're mostly, like I'd say 90% of the time, you are going to be using skill 1, just to debuff the enemy just because they last 5 turns. So this is definitely going to be one of the skills you use a lot. The other ones, I won't really see you use them too often. Like maybe if you're trying to do a nuke turn or whatever, like a turn to nuke, you'll maybe use skill 3 right before you ult, but that's about it. You won't do anything crazy with this. Maybe you might use skill 1 for like 3 of your turns, and then your 4th turn you'll skill 2 the hammering, and then on your 5th turn you'll, you know, consecutive strikes or something of the sort, right just right before you nuke, something like that, right? But either way, you're mainly going to be using it for this, your skill 1, just to inflict this, and because it lasts quite a bit of turns, you won't have too much problems trying to do that with your ult. Now, in terms of skill level priority, I definitely think the ult is the one that you should focus on first, because this is what's going to be her main damage output. Then it should be your skill 1, because your skill 1 is the one that you're going to be trying to inflict the enemy with the most for debuff, so you might as well get as much damage out of it as possible. Then it would probably be skill 2, just because skill 2 is another debuff, which isn't bad and does decent damage, and it only costs 15 curse energy. And then skill 3, because skill 3, the thing with that is we're not really using it for its damage output, but mainly for its increased own damage dealt. And it at level 1 and at level 10 are like literally same modifiers, so there's like no reason to go anything crazy for it unless you just want more damage, which, like I said, the main damage dealer is going to be your ult, and to capitalize off of your ult, you're going to be spamming your 1 very often. Now, let's talk about where she kind of sits when you kind of compare them to other characters. So let's go to the SSR characters and let's go to the greens. So the character she's the most likely going to get compared to the most is going to be Green Gojo, which is Hollow Purple Gojo, just because they're both carries for the green type. And I'm not going to lie, Nobara will do more damage than Purple Gojo using the same supports, and the only reason for that is because she has a higher ceiling due to the fact that you can continuously stack debuffs on the enemy and then increase the like the Jujutsu damage modifier all the way up to 260%, which means she can definitely output way more damage than Gojo in one single sitting. Of course, keep in mind you do have to have a lot of setup and all that for that to be reliable, but if you're fighting like some kind of event where you can't debuff an enemy, she's probably not going to be very good there, while Hollow Purple Gojo will be significantly better than her, right? In general, for most content, buffs are going to be higher priority anyways than debuffs, but because a lot of the enemies do have like debuff removals and resistances to certain debuffs, so that does kind of diminish her value a little bit compared to Hollow Purple Gojo, who can just absolutely output tremendous damage even without, you know, stacking a bunch of debuffs. Now, you could say that she is better than Hollow Purple Gojo. As I said, overall she does more damage than him, but Gojo ult, his AoE is strong at nuking, and you can just like he's much easier to like use in a lot of content. You don't have to need you don't need a lot of setup for him to get going. Meanwhile, Nobara, you do need a lot of, you need not a lot, but you do need like specific characters to make sure that the team is working, so that way she can do more damage than him. And depending on the stages, you might that might be a nerf to herself if, you know, the enemy can't be debuffed. I mean, on top of that, I do like to say that you can use the two characters on the same team. That's completely an option. I mean, there will be some cases that you might, and there's some cases that you won't, because he can debuff enemies too. So him being able to debuff enemies will work with Nobara as well, who can also debuff. So he can essentially have good synergy with her. So it's not like they're both bad. It's just, I feel like Gojo is just an easier character to pick so far as, you know, what we've seen off of her, right? But she does have a strong Black Flash, which is very powerful, giving herself 45% Jujutsu damage increase and recovering curse energy. Like, you're always going to have curse energy, which is very good for her. But like in most cases, like I said, you're going to be using her skill 1 a lot of the time, just because it lasts 5 turns and you need as much debuffs as possible for your ult. Now, considering everything I've already talked about, and them being like really the only 2 main DPS carries like that are powerful, like Maki's okay, nothing crazy about her though. And then you have Geto, but he's not like, I wouldn't say he's like the very best for green. Either way, you know, they're very powerful, but I think Nobara is still gonna fall short under Gojo. Now, the question is, from the entirety of this video, as I just kind of wanted to briefly run over her and talk about how she is currently, should you summon for this character? That's what we want to know, right? Because obviously that's why you're watching the video. I don't think you should summon for this character, because this character most definitely is bait. As you know, anniversary is roughly about a month-ish away or so, right? So just having her like just throwing all in for just her is just ridiculous. Like especially when Gojo is in the standard banner, you could get him. Once you get him, it's like why you don't really need Nobara, even if he's a little bit weaker in terms of like how much DPS you can do. It's just not worth it. I'm not gonna lie. If it wasn't for the timing with anniversary being so close, I'd say maybe you could do some multis, right? Because she's basically just as good as Green Gojo, who keep in mind on JP, he is an SS tier DPS character, so he's literally on the top. It's just Nobara, she needs setup, so she's definitely a higher DPS than him. It's just the setup, and on top of that, the timing isn't good. You shouldn't summon for her. You literally shouldn't summon for her at all. I think the only characters you should really target are characters that have insane supports or Gojo characters, just because Gojo, it's harder for that character to fall off, especially with how they kind of build each Gojo. They kind of make him like OP as hell each time. So anniversary soon, probably gonna get that Gojo, and he's probably going to be a red, because we don't have a red Gojo and we already have a blue, green, and yellow Gojo. So probably just save. There's no reason to summon for Nobara right now. Nobara is good, but Gojo's in standard banner. You could get Gojo, and even though he's not as high DPS as I've said before, he's basically right up there regardless as a top DPS, because he's so simple to use and always does great damage output no matter what with like almost any kind of team, right? So yeah, don't summon for Nobara. You should probably just save all your currency. Anniversary's right around the corner. But yeah, I mean, I basically talked about what she does as well, so that's good, right? Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.